everyone. I'm Emily Howard. I'm the program coordinator for art education and assistant professor in the art department at Meredith College. I absolutely love teaching lessons that integrate math and art. There are so many natural connections that are already there, and it allows students to be creative and understand difficult concepts through a project. My absolute favorite way of teaching this is through weaving. Today we will be doing a project that allows for the students to plot coordinate points on a coordinate plane and create a composition using that process. It will be a simple composition, but that will allow them to understand the process of weaving on a tapestry loom. We will be looking at math concepts from 5th grade, plotting coordinate points and coordinate planes, and we will be connecting that with a weaving project. The weaving project will involve a small tapestry loom using a cardboard loom that you can either purchase or you can make your own using any scrap piece of cardboard. This project is a great project for students after they've learned coordinate points and coordinate planes. As the semester goes on and students are, maybe it's getting to the end of the year and there's end of year tests, it would be a great project to really help them remember how it works, but also cement that knowledge. This is really geared towards the 5th grade and would definitely take 2 or 3 class periods to complete the project. One day working on the coordinate points and coordinate planes, and the next day working on the weaving. Depending on how difficult the weaving is, some students may need an extra day to continue working on that. Everybody works at their own speed, and weaving is one of those things that it's hard to predict how long students will need for that weaving. Students will often struggle with the just very beginning. Once they learn how to weave, they're over that hump. Tapestry is really just plain weave, and that's the most basic, simple stitch. It's an over-under stitch. But you're creating a composition. Ours will be an abstract, geometric leaning composition, but you are trying to copy something. So that will be the hardest part for students is getting over that hump. If you were also to start a coordinate point and coordinate plane project with this weaving, you could do that, but I think you would want to keep it as simple as possible so that the students don't get flustered or confused right off the bat. I want to show you all of the materials that I have today. Starting with, we've got different colors of yarn. You can encourage students to have a color scheme. I sort of went with an analogous color scheme, colors closest to each other on the color wheel. And I have my graph paper here. I have a pen and a ruler. I've got tape. I've got colored pencils, and I have a plastic fork that's going to be used in the weaving process. I have a tapestry needle. Mine is a metal needle, but you can definitely use plastic needles. And then I have my cardboard loom. I've got these 2 dice too, and this is the way that I made plotting the coordinate points on the coordinate plane. Just a little more fun, and it makes sure that the students aren't hung up on what their coordinate points are going to be. Is you just kind of take a roll of the dice and you'll find out. I've got 2 dice and I've made my project match up so that it's a 6x6 coordinate plane. So any number I get will be able to be plotted on that coordinate plane. And now I can give you a better look at the project and how you might go about teaching this project. So I said I was using the dice. Students can you know, make the red one the first number and the blue one the second number, or however they want to do it. If you don't have colored dice, that's totally fine too. They can decide how they want that number order to go. So I would just roll my dice. I got a 2 and a 3. So I would go over 2 and then up 3 and plot my point right there at the 2 and the 3. I've actually already created a composition here using 4 sets of numbers that I rolled. So I had 4, 5, 6, 2, 1, 1, and 4, 2. And if I follow all the numbers and then go back to the start, I could create a shape, but I think that's a little bit more complex for a beginning weaving. So I use tracing paper to go over my coordinate plane here. And I just plotted all my points, connected the dots, and then colored in the top half and the bottom half 2 different colors. I have my yarn here that are going to match those. Now that I have my composition, I'm finished with my coordinate points and coordinate planes, and I'm going to get my yarn ready for my warp. So the warp is the part of the yarn, of the weaving that is vertical. So it is the starting point. I'm using a cardboard loom that I purchased on Dick Blick, but you can use, you know, any piece of cardboard that you want, cut notches into the top, and it's a really low-tech and cheap way of creating a loom. Either way, I've got my masking tape here, and I'm just going to tape this down. I think when working with first-time weavers especially, you want to use the whole loom, meaning I'll wrap it all the way around. That way students can make choices about how they finish off their weaving, whether they tie knots and have tassels or cut it short. It just makes it easy for tying it off. Now that I've finished off my weaving, I'm at the back again, and I can cut my end and tape it down. Now I'm ready to start weaving. So looking at my composition, I encourage students to put it, and that can be anywhere. That you can work at the bottom down here, which is sometimes easier for students. So I'm going to fold that. Slide it in, and just kind of line up that composition so it makes sense for my weaving. And then I'm going to start with yellow. So thread my needle. Students can tie on. That sometimes works best for them to tie that into a knot, and you can just cut it off when you're done. And then you can ask them to measure. However many, and then go over a little bit. So that's probably good. And then I'll just add a little bit more. And then they'll begin by going over, under. So every other one. Now this is definitely a part where students get confused, and if you don't start off with this, and I would use this as guided practice where everybody gets to this point, and then what you want to do is have them tuck that end under, and 2 times is probably good, and then they can use their fork to put that into place. Move all this junk out of the way. And if you see I'm getting somewhat tangled with my yarn, students will probably have that issue too. Okay, so now I'm just going back, but the opposite. So if I went over under, I'm now doing under over. And when you get to this part, it's going to line up because you've tucked that under, but you just ignore it. That's fine. I also like to talk about tension, so encourage the students to pull their last warp thread, and you're pulling tension on this side and on this side and pulling away from each other, and that will give it a nice selve edge being the self-made edge of a weaving. And then you keep going until you get up to the red area, because at this point it's all yellow. And this is, it's important, I think, for their compositions to have a little bit of that so they can just get used to the weaving part. And you could always have them start out by just weaving an inch of whatever color they start with as maybe a border, and they could finish that off at the top as well so that they get used to the over-under technique. I've filled in all of the yellow that goes straight across with my weft, the weft being the yarn that is horizontal and it fills in the color on the weaving. So I'm at the point where now I would not go all the way across because I'm trying to mimic this design here. And I want to talk a little bit more about the design also. What I like about it is that it's got this, it kind of looks like it's a portion of a star, and that partially has to do with my color scheme, but it connects to the display cloth that is a Kuba cloth that the museum has. It is made with raffia and pigment, and it's very geometric in design, and how a geometric design, it really shows off how a geometric design can be powerful and very interesting. And so I would use that as a image to share with the students. It is also a textile piece. Okay, so back to the weaving. I would then not go all the way across. I would go to maybe this last one here, and instead of going all the way through, I will skip this last one. I'm going to come back to it later with my red, but right now I'm going to skip it. Now that I'm finished weaving, I'm ready to take my weaving off of the loom. There's a couple ways to do this. I chose to wrap my warp all the way around the loom, which I think for first-time weavers is a great way of doing it because you end up with a lot of choices and you don't have them running out of room at the ends. I also have a few of my yarns left over, so I'm just going to snip those. If you had tucked your threads, you would snip those at the end. You can see my warp has pulled in a little bit here. Partially that's just due to the tension that's happening between the warp ends. But there is also a little bit of, you know, pulling in on the sides there, which is okay. I'm going to start by taking my tape off, so that's not there. And because of the size, I'm going to go with a 2x2. Meaning I'm going to go 2 at a time. And I'm just going to snip it up there. I could snip it in the back, but it's easier for this video to show you by snipping at the top. And I'm going to double knot it. I'm almost at the end, and I have 3 warp threads left. I also have this little bit of the red weft thread here, and I'm going to take advantage of that. You can choose to do 3 together. That's okay also. But I'm going to do a double knot here and then use that tiny bit of a weft thread to gently tie this here. So now I've finished one side of taking it off. What I'm going to do is just take out my little sketch there, turn it over, and I can undo these. So this is the finished product. I can decide which side I want to display it. This was the side I wove on, and I had tucked some threads under, so I can snip those off. I can also, snip these little ends off and make it shorter and use my warp threads as part of the design. Or you can, fold it back and just tape them back there if you want to mount it on a little piece of mat board or something like that. But having the long warp threads, it makes it easy for first-time weavers to take it off the loom. Okay, once you're finished weaving, you can take them off the loom and display them in various ways. And I think it's a great opportunity to discuss some of the problems that students encountered while weaving. There's a lot of problems that happen throughout weaving, and weavers have been doing this for centuries and creating ways to overcome those problems. So how did your students do that? They can discuss that, learn from their peers, and learn from their own experiences. Thank you so much for weaving with me today and for trying this project out.